The beeping of the heart monitor was the only clock I had left. It was a merciless rhythm, each electronic pulse a reminder of the one heartbeat I was desperate to hear again on my own. For 3 weeks, this small, sterile room at St. Jude's Hospital had been my world. The scratchy vinyl of the visitor's chair, the scent of antiseptic that clung to my clothes, the low hum of the machines that were keeping my husband, Liam, alive. This was my reality now. I'd learned to sleep in 20-minute increments, my body jolting awake at the slightest change in the rhythmic beeping. I'd memorized the nurses' schedules, the way the morning light hit the linoleum floor, the exact shade of gray in Liam's unshaven jaw. I was the keeper of his stillness, the guardian of his silence. The doctors had been vague, their words wrapped in practiced sympathy. Traumatic brain injury, they'd said. The next few weeks are critical. The accident itself was a ghost, a story told to me by a grim-faced police officer. Liam's car had veered off the road on a clear night. No other vehicles involved, no explanation. It had slammed into an old oak tree on a deserted stretch of highway. They found him unconscious, his phone shattered, his wallet still in his pocket. It didn't make sense. Liam was the safest driver I knew, the kind of man who checked his mirrors twice and never drove tired. I ran my thumb over the back of his hand, his skin cool and still, his fingers, usually so full of life, sketching designs for a new building, strumming his old guitar, tracing patterns on my back as we fell asleep, were now limp. I whispered to him every day, telling him about my boring day, about the leaky faucet I'd finally fixed, about the ridiculous plot of the show I was half watching on my laptop. I read him chapters from his favorite books, hoping the sound of my voice might be a thread he could follow back to me, back to the world. But there was only the steady, maddening beep of the monitor. The door creaked open, and a nurse peeked in, her smile gentle. "Chloe, honey, you need to get some real food. You've been here all day." I shook my head. "I'm okay, Sarah. I just want to be here when he—" My voice trailed off. I couldn't bring myself to say if he wakes up. The word felt like a betrayal. She sighed, her eyes full of a pity I was starting to resent. "Mark is here to see you. He's just in the waiting room. Maybe you two could grab some coffee from the cafeteria." My heart lifted just a fraction. Mark, Liam's best friend. He had been our rock through this nightmare. Since the day of the accident, he had been a constant, steady presence. He'd handled the calls to Liam's frantic parents, managed the paperwork from the insurance company, and sat with me for hours in this very room, sharing stories about their college days, making me laugh through my tears. He was the only person who seemed to understand the depth of my pain, because he was in it too. He loved Liam like a brother. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Tell him I'll be out in a minute." I leaned down and kissed Liam's forehead, my lips brushing against his cool skin. "I'll be right back," I murmured, my throat tight. "Don't go anywhere." The irony of my own words was a bitter pill. He wasn't going anywhere. He was trapped somewhere I couldn't reach, and I was trapped here with him, waiting for a sign, a flicker, anything to prove that the man I loved was still in there. As I stood up, my legs stiff from sitting for so long, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I hadn't realized how much I was leaning on Mark, how much I needed his strength to get through this. He was the only good thing in this relentless storm, a reminder of the life we had before the silence fell. I just didn't know he was the one who had created the storm in the first place. Mark was waiting for me just outside the ICU doors, his tall frame leaning against the pale green wall. He was holding 2 cups of coffee, one of which he immediately offered to me. His face, usually so quick to smile, was etched with a familiar concern. He had the kind of kind eyes that made you want to trust him instantly, the same ones that had looked at Liam with brotherly affection at our wedding. "I figured you could use this," he said, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "You look exhausted, Chloe." I took the cup, the warmth seeping into my cold hands. "I am," I admitted, "but I can't leave. What if something happens?" "Nothing is going to happen in the 20 minutes it takes you to drink a cup of coffee," he said gently, guiding me toward a small deserted waiting area. "You have to take care of yourself, too. Liam would want you to." He was right, of course. Liam would be horrified to see me like this. Pale, sleep-deprived, living on vending machine snacks and lukewarm coffee. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the awkward quiet of the hospital filling the space between us. Mark had been Liam's other half since they were freshmen in college. They'd built their architectural firm together from the ground up, their shared dream taking shape in steel and glass across the city. They weren't just business partners. They were family. Mark was the best man at our wedding, the godfather to our hypothetical future children, the one person Liam trusted with everything. "Any news?" Mark asked, breaking the silence. I shook my head, staring into my coffee cup. "The same. The doctors say it's a waiting game. His brain needs time to heal." Mark reached over and squeezed my shoulder. His touch was firm, grounding. "He's a fighter, Chloe. If anyone can come back from this, it's him." I managed a weak smile. "I know." We talked for a little while longer, reminiscing about a disastrous camping trip the three of us had taken last summer. The one where a raccoon stole all our food, and Liam tried to build a raft out of twigs and misplaced optimism. The memory brought a genuine laugh to my lips, a sound that felt foreign and rusty. For a moment, it felt normal, like we were just two friends worrying about a third. I felt a surge of gratitude for Mark. He was holding us all together. I should get back," I said finally, standing up. "Thank you for the coffee, Mark, and for everything." "Of course," he said, his expression serious. "I'm here for you, for both of you, always." He walked with me back to Liam's room. At the door, he paused. "Do you mind if I sit with him for a bit? Alone? There's just some stuff I want to say to him." "Of course," I said without hesitation. It made perfect sense. He probably had things to say he couldn't say in front of me. Business updates or inside jokes meant only for Liam. "I'm just going to lie down in the chair for a bit. I think my eyes are going to close whether I want them to or not." I settled back into the uncomfortable visitor's chair, pulling a thin hospital blanket over my legs. Mark gave me a small, sad smile before walking over to Liam's bedside. I closed my eyes, feigning a deeper exhaustion than I felt, though it wasn't much of a stretch. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor was a familiar, almost soothing drone. I heard Mark pull a chair closer to the bed, the scrape of its legs against the floor sharp in the quiet room. I listened to the soft rustle of his jacket, the sound of his deep, steady breathing. And then I heard him start to whisper. The world outside the thin hospital blanket had gone quiet. The usual hallway chatter seemed to fade away, leaving only the low electronic pulse of the machines and the sound of Mark's breathing, close and heavy. I kept my own breaths even and slow, my eyes shut tight, trying to give him the privacy he'd asked for. I expected to hear him talk about work, about the firm, maybe a quiet plea for Liam to wake up. But the words that slipped from his lips were not words of encouragement. They were a confession, whispered into the sterile air like a venomous secret. "God, Liam, look at you," Mark began, his voice a raw, strained whisper I had never heard before. It was stripped of the confident charm he showed the world. This was something else, something broken. "You were always the lucky one, weren't you? Always got the girl, the perfect life, the effortless smile. Everyone loved you. I loved you. Life. But I hated you for it too." My heart stuttered. I felt a cold dread begin to creep up my spine, but I didn't move. I couldn't. It was like my body had turned to stone, my muscles locked in place by a terrifying curiosity. "I saw the way she looked at you," he continued, his voice cracking. "Chloe, she looked at you like you hung the moon, and you just took it for granted. You had no idea what you had. Do you know what it's like to watch the only woman you've ever loved be in love with your best friend? To have to smile and clap you on the back at your wedding? To have to listen to you talk about your future? A future that should have been mine? The only woman you've ever loved?" The words echoed in my head, nonsensical and horrifying. I thought of all the times Mark had been at our house for dinner, all the times he'd laughed at my stupid jokes, all the friendly hugs, the supportive texts. I had seen him as a brother. How could I have been so blind? "I tried to be happy for you, man. I really did." he whispered, his voice thick with a terrifying mix of sorrow and rage. But every time I saw her smile at you, something inside me just broke. And that night of the accident, I couldn't take it anymore. My breath caught in my throat. I had to force myself to stay still, to keep breathing evenly. The beeping of the monitor suddenly sounded like a scream in my ears. You called me, remember? Mark's whisper was barely audible now, laced with a chilling intimacy. You were on your way home, so happy. You just landed that big museum contract. You were talking about taking Chloe to Italy to celebrate. And I just snapped. I told you I was on that same stretch of road, that my car had broken down. I asked you to pull over. And you did, because you're a good guy. You always were. He paused, and I could hear him take a shuddering breath. You got out of your car to help me. You didn't even see it coming. I didn't mean to hit you that hard, I swear. I just wanted to slow you down, stop you. I don't know. I just wanted a chance. I cut your brake line, just a small snip, enough to make it look like a malfunction. Then I drove ahead and watched in my rearview mirror. I just wanted you out of the way for a little while, not like this. The room began to spin. Every word was a nail being hammered into my soul. The clear night, the single car crash, the mechanical failure. It wasn't an accident. It was an attack. It was calculated. It was Mark. And now she leans on me, he finished, his voice a twisted mix of triumph and despair. She trusts me. She thinks I'm the good guy, the one holding everything together. She'll need someone to take care of her, Liam. And I'll be here. I'll finally get my chance. Just wake up and tell me you forgive me. Or don't. Maybe it's better if you don't. He fell silent. All I could hear was the frantic pounding of my own heart, a wild drumbeat against the steady, electronic pulse of Liam's. Mark thought he was confessing to a man who couldn't hear him, purging his guilt in the safety of a coma. He had no idea that he had just confessed to the one person who would make sure he would never get away with it. I lay there motionless, trapped under the thin blanket, my world completely and utterly shattered. He hadn't just tried to kill my husband. He had tried to steal my life, and I had let him in. I had trusted him. For what felt like an eternity, I didn't move. I lay frozen under the blanket, the sound of Mark's confession replaying in my mind like a looped nightmare. Each word was a shard of glass embedding itself deeper into my heart. He had done this. The man who had held my hand in this very room, who had promised me Liam would pull through, was the reason he was here in the first place. My grief, which had been a heavy, suffocating fog, sharpened into something else, a cold, terrifying clarity, and with it came a white-hot rage that burned away the tears before they could even form. I heard him shift in his chair, then the soft sound of his footsteps as he walked toward the door. He paused for a moment, and I held my breath, praying he wouldn't try to touch me, wouldn't whisper some comforting lie before he left. He didn't. The door clicked shut, and I was alone again. But the silence was different now. The door clicked. It was no longer empty. It was filled with his monstrous secret. Slowly, I pushed the blanket off and sat up. My body was trembling, not from cold, but from shock. I looked at Liam, lying so still in the bed, and a fresh wave of horror washed over me. He had been betrayed by the man he called his brother. I stared at my own hands, remembering how Mark had held one just an hour ago. His touch meant to convey sympathy, while his soul harbored this darkness. Every memory I had of him was now tainted, poisoned. The friendly dinners, the shared laughter, the comforting words. It was all a performance, a long, patient, calculated lie. My mind raced back through the past few years, searching for signs I had missed. Had there been moments? A look that lingered too long? A compliment that felt slightly too personal? I remembered a conversation we'd had at our last barbecue. Mark had been talking about a recent breakup, and he'd looked at me and said, "Some guys just don't know how lucky they are." At the time, I thought he was just being philosophical. Now, the memory made my skin crawl. He wasn't talking about some other guy. He was talking about Liam. He was talking about me, the police. I had to call the police. I reached for my phone, my fingers fumbling with the screen. But then I stopped. What would I say? My husband's best friend just confessed to causing the accident while whispering to my comatose husband. I was pretending to be asleep and overheard him. They would think I was hysterical, a grieving wife cracking under the pressure. It was my word against his. Mark was a respected businessman, a pillar of the community. I was a wreck who hadn't slept properly in weeks. They wouldn't believe me without proof. The thought of Detective Miller flashed in my mind. He was the one who had handled the case, a gruff, no-nonsense man who had looked at the accident report with a skeptical eye. "It's just odd, Mrs. Foster," he'd told me, "for a car that well-maintained to have a sudden brake failure on a dry road. It's not impossible, but it's a one-in-a-million thing." At the time, I dismissed it as an attempt to find blame where there was none. Now, his words felt like a prophecy, but even he would need more than my testimony. I needed proof. I needed to get Mark to say it again, somewhere, somehow, where it could be recorded. The idea was terrifying. I would have to face him again, pretend I knew nothing, and play the part of the grieving, vulnerable woman who leaned on him for support. I would have to look into the eyes of the man who tried to murder my husband and act like he was my friend. Could I do it? Could I stomach the deception? The bile rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I had to. For Liam. He had fought for his life on that lonely road, and now I had to fight for his justice. My fear was nothing compared to the fury that was now coursing through my veins. The waiting game was over. My game had just begun. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. I had to perform a constant, draining act of normalcy, a feat that required every ounce of my strength. I smiled at the nurses, thanked visitors for their flowers, and updated Liam's family with a carefully constructed calm in my voice. But underneath, I was a coiled spring of rage and fear. Every time Mark texted to check in, "Thinking of you, Chloe. Stay strong." I had to fight the urge to smash my phone against the wall. Instead, I'd reply with a simple, "Thank you. That means a lot." Each word a lie that tasted like ash in my mouth. I spent hours watching Liam, searching his still face for any sign of change. The doctors remained cautiously non-committal, their language a buffer against both hope and despair. "We're monitoring the pressure," they'd say. "His vitals are stable." It was a state of suspended animation for both of us. My life had become a holding pattern, but now it had a purpose. I was no longer just waiting for him to wake up. I was gathering my strength for a battle. The shift happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was reading aloud to Liam, my voice a low monotone, when I saw it. A flicker. Aloud to Liam, his left index finger, the one with the small silver ring we'd bought on our first anniversary, twitched. It was tiny, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I stopped reading, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Liam," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Liam, can you hear me?" I squeezed his hand, my eyes fixed on his. "If you can hear me, squeeze my hand." For a long, agonizing moment, there was nothing. Disappointment washed over me. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just an involuntary muscle spasm. But then I felt it. A faint, weak pressure against my palm. It was barely there, but it was a response. It was him. Tears streamed down my face, hot and fast. They weren't tears of sadness this time, but of fierce, overwhelming hope. He was in there. He was fighting. I buzzed for the nurse, my hand shaking so badly I could barely press the button. "Doctor." Evans arrived moments later, his expression shifting from professional calm to cautious excitement as I explained what had happened. He performed a series of simple tests, asking Liam to squeeze his hand, to try to move his toes. The responses were faint, inconsistent, but they were undeniably there. "This is a very positive sign, Chloe," Dr. Evans said, a rare, genuine smile gracing his lips. "It's the first step on a very long road, but it's a significant one. It means his brain is starting to form connections again. We can't know what he'll remember when he fully emerges. But this is progress. When he fully emerges." The words sent a jolt of panic through me. If Liam woke up, what would he remember about the accident? Would he remember Mark's voice on the phone? Seeing him on the side of the road? The thought was both a blessing and a curse. His testimony would be the ultimate proof. But what if Mark found out he was improving? What would a man desperate enough to cause a crash do to a witness who could expose him? The urgency of my plan intensified tenfold. I was no longer just seeking justice for a past crime. I was trying to prevent a future one. That night, after the doctors had left and the hospital had settled back into its quiet rhythm, I made a decision. I couldn't wait for Liam to wake up and fight this battle for me. I had to do it myself, and I had to do it now. I couldn't go to the police yet. It was still too risky. My word against his was a gamble I couldn't afford to lose, not when Liam was so vulnerable. I needed a confession. I needed Mark to say those words again, and this time, the walls would have ears. My fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a fierce, protective resolve. Mark had underestimated me. He saw a grieving wife. He was about to meet a woman with nothing left to lose. The plan began to form in the quiet, sterile hours of the night, pieced together from a potent cocktail of fear, fury, and a desperate need for control. I knew I couldn't get Mark to confess at the hospital. It was too public, too unpredictable. I had to lure him somewhere I could control the environment. Our house. The place that was once our sanctuary would have to become my stage. The thought of him walking through our front door, crossing the threshold of the home he tried to destroy, made me feel sick, but it was the only way. The next morning, I called him. My hand was shaking so badly, I had to grip the phone with both hands. I took a deep breath, picturing Chloe, the grieving widow in waiting he thought I was. I had to sound broken, lost, and desperate for his comfort. He answered on the second ring, his voice dripping with that fake, practiced concern. "Chloe? Is everything okay? Is it Liam?" No, he's the same," I said, forcing a sob into my voice. It wasn't hard. The tears were always just below the surface. "It's me, Mark. I can't do this anymore. I can't sit in this hospital room for one more minute. I feel like I'm suffocating." There was a pause on the other end. "What do you need?" he asked, his tone shifting to the gentle, supportive friend. "Whatever it is, I'm here." I need to go home for a few hours. To feel normal, even for a little while," I whispered. "But I don't want to be alone." "Normal. The house feels so empty. Could you meet me there? Just for a bit? I feel like you're the only one who understands." The bait was laid. I was playing directly into the role he'd imagined for me, the damsel in distress, turning to him, her brave protector. "Of course, Chloe," he said instantly, just as I knew he would. "I'll be there. What time?" We set a time for that afternoon. After hanging up, I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to sit down. I was willingly inviting a monster into my home, but the image of Liam's twitching finger, of his faint squeeze, propelled me forward. I left the hospital, giving the nurses a plausible story about needing to pick up some things from home. The drive was a blur. When I arrived, the house felt alien. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sun, a layer of neglect covering every surface. Liam's favorite armchair sat empty, a silent testament to our shattered life. I didn't have time for grief. I had work to do. I went straight to Liam's study. He was a tech enthusiast, always buying the latest gadgets. Tucked away in a drawer, I found what I was looking for. A small, high-fidelity, voice-activated recorder, no bigger than a thumb drive. He'd bought it for recording lectures and meetings. Now it would record a confession. I tested it, making sure the sound was clear. Then came the hard part, where to hide it. I looked around the living room, my eyes scanning every surface. The bookshelf. He'd be sitting on the couch across from it. I slid the tiny device behind a thick copy of War and Peace, angling it just so. It was almost invisible. As a backup, I turned on the voice memo app on my phone and slipped it between the cushions of the couch where I would sit. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My hands were slick with sweat. I looked at the clock. He would be here in 30 minutes. I splashed cold water on my face, ruffled my hair to look appropriately distraught, and practiced my lines in the mirror. I had to be convincing. I had to be the woman he thought I was. Fragile, heartbroken, and completely oblivious. This wasn't just an act. It was the most important performance of my life. Liam's justice depended on it. The doorbell rang at precisely 3 p.m. The sound echoed through the silent house, each chime a hammer blow against my already frayed nerves. I took one last shuddering breath, wiped my palms on my jeans, and walked to the door. When I opened it, Mark was standing there, a bouquet of lilies in one hand, and a look of profound sympathy on his face. The sight of the flowers, so funereal and cliché, nearly made me laugh. "I thought these might brighten the place up a little," he said softly, stepping inside. "Thank you, Mark. That's really sweet of you," I murmured, taking the bouquet and leading him into the living room. My hands were trembling as I placed the flowers on the coffee table, right in front of the bookshelf where the recorder was hidden. He settled onto the couch, his presence filling the room, making it feel smaller, more suffocating. He looked around, his gaze lingering on the framed photos of me and Liam on the mantelpiece, laughing on a beach, smiling at our wedding, blissfully unaware. It must be so hard being here without him," he said, his voice laced with counterfeit empathy. I sank onto the opposite couch, making sure my phone was wedged securely in the cushions. "It is," I whispered, letting my shoulders slump in defeat. Every corner reminds me of him. I keep expecting him to walk through that door. I let a tear trail down my cheek. I just don't know how I'm going to live without him, Mark. This was it. The moment to steer the conversation. I had to make him feel safe, to make him feel like he was my only confidant. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, adopting the posture of a trusted advisor. "You're stronger than you think, Chloe. You'll get through this. And you're not alone. I'm here." "I know, and I'm so grateful," I said, looking him directly in the eye. "You've been a better friend to me through all of this than anyone. You loved him so much. It must be killing you, too." He nodded, his jaw tight. "It is. It must be killing you." He was my brother. "Sometimes," I continued, my voice barely a whisper, "I get so angry. At the car, at the road, at God. Why him? It feels so random, so unfair. It's like the universe just decided to take him." Mark's expression darkened slightly. "Sometimes things aren't random, Chloe." My heart leaped. He was taking the bait. "What do you mean?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. He looked like a man burdened by a terrible secret, which of course he was. "I just mean, life isn't always fair. Liam, he had everything. A perfect career, a perfect wife. Sometimes I think I was so jealous of him." "Jealous?" I asked, feigning surprise. "But you were his partner. You built everything together." "It wasn't about the business," he said, his voice dropping lower. It was about you." He looked at me, his eyes intense, searching. "I've always cared about you, Chloe. More than just a friend. Watching you with him, it was torture." I held my breath, my entire body rigid. The recorders were running. "Mark, I had no idea," I stammered, playing my part. "Of course you didn't," he said with a bitter laugh. "You only ever had eyes for him. That night of the accident, I just wanted him to feel what it was like to lose something, to not have everything go his way for once. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never wanted him to be hurt like this. I wanted a chance with you." He leaned closer, his voice pleading. "Can you understand that? I did it because I love you." There it was. The confession, clear and undeniable, captured on two separate devices. The rage inside me was a roaring inferno, but on the outside, I remained perfectly still. I had him. I slowly stood up, my manufactured fragility falling away like a shed skin. My expression hardened, the tears gone, replaced by a cold, quiet fury. Mark's face registered confusion, then dawning horror as he saw the change in me. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. "You're right about one thing, Mark," I said, my voice dangerously calm, as I reached into the couch cushions and pulled out my phone, holding it up so he could see the recording app was still running. I do only have eyes for him, and you will never have a chance with me. The color drained from Mark's face. He stared at the phone in my hand. Then his eyes darted to the bookshelf, a frantic, cornered look taking over his features. He understood. The carefully constructed world of lies he had built around me had just imploded. "Chloe, what is this?" he stammered, scrambling to his feet. "You were recording me?" "I recorded everything," I said, my voice as cold and sharp as glass. Every last pathetic, self-serving word. "I heard you at the hospital, Mark. I was awake. I heard your whole little confession to my husband." He took a step back, shaking his head in disbelief. "No, you couldn't have." "Oh, but I did," I interrupted, taking a step toward him. For the first time, he looked afraid of me. "You told him you cut his brake line. You told him you did it because you were in love with me. You watched him crash. You left him for dead on the side of the road, and then you came to the hospital and held my hand and pretended to be our friend." "I didn't mean for him to get hurt so badly," he pleaded, his voice cracking. I just wanted to slow him down, to get him out of the picture for a while." "You wanted to steal his life," I shot back, my voice finally rising with the fury I had suppressed for so long. "His career, his home, his wife. You're not a friend, Mark. You're a monster." As I spoke, I discreetly pressed a pre-programmed number on my phone. Outside, just down the street, Detective Miller and his partner had been waiting. I had called him that morning, told him I had a strong suspicion about Mark, and was going to try to get a confession. He had been skeptical, but intrigued enough to agree to wait nearby. Mark lunged for my phone, but I was faster. I sidestepped him, holding it out of his reach. "It's too late," I said calmly. "They're already on their way." His face crumpled. The arrogant, charming facade was gone, replaced by the terrified face of a man whose future had just evaporated. He sank back onto the couch, burying his face in his hands as the sound of sirens grew louder in the distance. When the police burst through the front door moments later, he didn't resist. He just sat there, broken, as Detective Miller read him his rights and cuffed his hands behind his back. As they led him away, he looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and utter defeat. I just stared back, unmoved. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media attention. The recording was undeniable. Mark was charged with attempted murder, and with his confession, the case was airtight. I didn't have to testify. The recording spoke for me. Through it all, I spent my days back where I belonged, by Liam's side. The faint flickers of consciousness had grown stronger. He started responding to my voice more consistently, his eyes opening for brief, unfocused moments. The doctors were optimistic. The long road ahead didn't seem so daunting anymore. One evening, about a month after Mark's arrest, I was sitting in the familiar vinyl chair, holding Liam's hand and telling him about the case. His eyes were open, and for the first time, they seemed to be focused on me. "He's going to prison for a very long time, Liam," I whispered. "He'll never hurt you, or anyone, ever again." His thumb moved, stroking the back of my hand. It was a deliberate, familiar gesture. Then, his lips parted, and a sound emerged, hoarse and rusty from disuse. "Ch, low." My name. He said my name. I leaned forward, my heart soaring. "I'm here, Liam. I'm right here." He looked at me, his eyes clear and present for the first time in months. A single tear rolled down his temple. The future was still a vast, unknown territory. There would be physical therapy, recovery, and scars both visible and invisible that we would have to navigate together. But as I looked into my husband's eyes, I knew we would face it all. The storm had passed. Mark had tried to destroy our lives, but he had failed. He had underestimated me. He thought he could break me, but instead, he had shown me a strength I never knew I possessed. I wasn't just a wife anymore, I was a survivor. And our life, the one we would rebuild from the ashes, would be stronger than ever before.